Ever heard the roar of bombs shattering the silence of a once peaceful village? Imagine the acrid stench of smoke clinging to the air as Russian boots trample Ukrainian soil, claiming inch by inch while promising total victory. Here is a mind-blowing fact that'll shake your world. Vladimir Putin's relentless war machine has bled Russia dry, sacrificing over 1 million lives for a mere 1.45% of Ukraine, a pathetic sliver that mocks his grand ambitions. What if I told you this so-called invincible empire is crumbling from within, its soldiers ghosts in a failing fight? Picture the crunch of frozen earth under their heels, the bitter wind howling through empty fields as they charge toward fortress cities that refuse to fall. But hold on, because the brutal truth hits harder than you think. In the chaos of battle, where the sharp crack of gunfire echoes like thunder, Russia's narrative dominates the screams. Putin paints a picture of unstoppable conquest, his forces devouring Ukrainian land daily until the Donbass defenses shatter. With that, their eyes turn to Kiev itself, poised to swallow the whole nation unless Ukraine surrenders now. That's the facade he thrusts upon the world, a spectacle of dominance hiding utter devastation. Yet, the real story simmers beneath, a twisted irony where Putin's obsession devours his own homeland for that laughable 1.45% gain. Feel the weight of that statistic, like a punch to the gut. Didn't The Economist's deep dive on December 2 expose this folly, showing minuscule returns for mountains of Russian sacrifice? How much more blood must spill before the world wakes up? Russian advances accelerated in 2025, swallowing 4,562 square kilometers or 1,760 square miles of Ukraine by December. That sounds substantial, right? But compared to Ukraine's vast expanse, it's a drop in the ocean, edging out the 3,704 square kilometers, or 1,440 square miles, grabbed in 2024. November surged at a feverish pace, a near record since the invasion's dawn, as 690 square kilometers, or 266 square miles, collapsed in just 30 days. The icy chill of winter air masks the coming storm, signaling doom for Ukraine's brave stand. Isn't this progress a trapdoor into despair? What horrors lurk behind those gleaming numbers Putin hides from the globe? Pause for a second. That 266 square mile November haul boils down to capturing 1.5 Los Angeles International airports daily, a joke amid the emptiness. Smell the scorched earth, feel the rusted metal shells of abandoned tanks as Russia seizes barren ground to besiege unbreakable cities. Their inability to crack a single major stronghold makes this speed a cruel illusion. Even minor spots like Pokrovsk, under siege for over a year, drag on with its 61,000 souls, Ukraine's 73rd largest pre-war. The Economist's raw truth lays it bare: in 3 years, Russia snagged just 1.45% more Ukrainian land, mirroring the population share, 0 big cities conquered. Pathetic, right? Who could stomach such meager wins after endless slaughter? Oh, the agony deepens when you tally the cost. Russia now holds around 20% of Ukraine, chewing up Crimea from 2014 in early invasion grabs later pushed back. Since the war bogged down their snail-paced gains, costly beyond measure, beg the question, is this devastation worth it for Putin? A meta-estimate from The Economist puts Russian losses at 1 million to 1.35 million dead or injured. Breathe that in, and the bitter scent of regret heavy in every commander's breath. United 24 ties this to U.S. World War II casualties of 416,800, a staggering parallel over time. Could history repeat with such fury here? Rubio's words sting like shrapnel. 100,000 Russians perished in the first half of 2025 alone, a quarter of America's World War II toll in just 6 months. Russia's attrition strategy, haunted by Soviet legacies of 8.8 to 10.7 million soldiers lost plus civilians, persists. With wounded ratios plummeting 1.3 per dead due to forsaken medicine on the frozen front, survival dwindles. Hear the desperate gasps of the injured, left to freeze in mud-slick trenches. This tide sweeps forcibly, recruiting waves that might drown the nation. When will Putin admit the math is a mockery? Delve into the grim projections. If Russia maintains this crawl, conquering Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia, another 20,345 square kilometers, could stretch to May 2028. That's 2.5 years of more agony, costing 800,000 to 900,000 extra casualties, pushing totals past 2 million for just 22 to 23% control. The tactile grip of despair tightens as families clutch faded letters. Divide 80% remaining by 1.45%, and wild extrapolation emerges. Over 55 3-year stints mean 165 years of war, 55 million dead Russians if Ukraine holds. A generational curse that humbles the conqueror, turning his legacy to ash. And Ukraine bleeds too, though we've yet to plunge there. These figures underscore Putin's self-inflicted grind, his myths of dominance evaporating. Far from triumph, he ravages Russia, a hollow shell for future generations. Feel the tremors of national ruin. In peace talks, does this expose his bluff? The Jamestown Foundation sees territory as his leverage, escalating threats for imagined strength. What leverage remains when the cost is catastrophic? As negotiations intensify under eyesightless eyes, Russia's bluster fades. Imagine the unexpected twist: this war's toll could topple Putin before victory, revealing his humiliation on the world stage. But what ripple effects await if Ukraine's defenses fracture next? The chill of uncertainty grips us all. The numbers tell a story, but they reveal a different reality beneath the surface. Imagine capturing just 266 square miles of hostile territory in a month, the equivalent of seizing a large portion of a major city. That's like Russia taking 1.5 Los Angeles international airports every day. Yet, most of this land is barren, empty ground, devoid of strategic value. The sound of silence echoes across vast plains, interrupted only by distant artillery fire. Russia's attempt to seize Ukraine's fortress cities remains a crushing failure. Despite a faster pace lately, this progress means very little when large urban centers still hold firm. Small towns like Pokrovsk, with its 61,000 residents, have withstood relentless attacks for over a year. Russia's strategy doesn't crack these strongholds. The core problem? The slow, painstaking crawl. After more than 3 years of brutal fighting, the data reveals a depressing truth: only 1.45% of Ukraine has fallen into Russian control. No major city has changed hands. Not even Pokrovsk, which Russia thought it could conquer easily. Revisit that staggering figure: 1.45% in 3 years. When you consider the full scope, it's a laughably tiny portion of Ukraine. Overall, Russia occupies roughly 20%, including Crimea seized in 2014, and territories in the south and east that have little strategic value now. Since the invasion began, progress has been microscopic, at a snail's pace, and unbelievably costly. The toll is immense. Estimates suggest Russia has sacrificed between 1 million to 1.35 million soldiers, killed or injured, since the conflict erupted. That's comparable to the number of U.S. soldiers lost in World War II over a similar period. Imagine that: an entire generation of Russian fighters lost for a fraction of Ukraine's land. The question haunting everyone: is this relentless attrition worth the gains? Or is Russia, in fact, destroying itself from within? As the death toll rises, the true cost of Putin's ambitions becomes undeniable. It's staggering, isn't it? We've just uncovered how Russia's casualties in Ukraine match America's losses in World War II across nearly 4 years. But dive deeper: the toll threatens to cripple Putin's machine forever. Imagine the weight of history pressing down. The National World War II Museum confirms America's grim tally: over 416,800 soldiers perished in that global inferno. Wounded figures remain elusive, shrouded in the chaos of varying sources. Yet the truth pierces through: these deaths paved the way for liberating Western Europe from Nazi grips, aiding Germany's downfall, and seizing territories across Africa and Asia. Feel the earth tremble under relentless boots? Hear the distant roar of engines and cries echoing through smoke-filled skies, as nations fought for survival. The question haunts us: why does Russia bleed so much for so little? Shockingly, America sacrificed similar numbers liberating multiple lands, while Russia fractures over just 1.45% of Ukraine. Fast forward to 2025's brutal reality. In the first 6 months alone, Marco Rubio, U.S. Secretary of State, reveals 100,000 Russian fighters have vanished into the abyss. That's a quarter of America's World War II dead, compressed into mere months. Imagine the acrid scent of gunpowder clinging to uniforms, the thud of boots sinking into mud, trembling fingers gripping cold metal. Isn't it infuriating? Sustaining such slaughter defines Russia's dark legacy. Historians whisper of 16 million Soviet losses in World War II, with military deaths hitting 11.5 million. Yet the museum paints a broader horror: 8.8 to 10.7 million soldiers gone, plus up to 15.2 million civilians. The point lingers, sharp as a winter frost. The attrition strategy, eroding lives and gear, has haunted Russia for decades. Putin deploys it here, turning Ukraine into a meat grinder. But 1.35 million soldiers lost for 1.45% of land? It's beyond absurd, even amid this savage approach. The Economist warns the unthinkable: nearly 1% of Russia's fighting-age men have already perished amid Ukraine's firefights. Smell the metallic tang of blood on rusted streets, the gritty sandpapery feel of frozen earth under siege. More deaths loom ahead. An October Politico exposé uncovers a damning trend: the ratio of Russian dead to wounded has plummeted. Citing Ukrainian military intel from the hotline I Want to Live, they expose the failure: only 1.3 wounded per death survive, dumped without evacuation or training in battlefield agony. Chaos brews. Why recruit masses when survival rates plummet? As attrition intensifies, Russia's strategy falters. If even a fraction return, the war devours Putin's empire, leaving a hollow shell, teetering on a catastrophic edge. What irrevocable terror awaits next? The ground shakes beneath us. Is Russia inching toward a nightmare it can't escape? In the ongoing conflict, Russia's relentless drive across Ukraine reveals a shocking paradox. The more they advance, the more they bleed from within. Despite occupying a mere 1.45% of Ukraine over 3 years, the true cost to Russia is staggering. What if their gains are a treacherous illusion, masking a far more devastating internal collapse? Russia's recent push has seen a faster pace: nearly 690 square kilometers, about 266 miles, lost to their forces in just a month. But don't be fooled by these numbers. Each day, what Russia captures are empty lands and shattered cities, not key strategic targets. Meanwhile, their efforts to seize the major urban centers, the fortress cities, have failed miserably. Small towns like Pokrovsk, with just 61,000 residents, held out for over a year. These minimal gains are a painful reminder: Russia's strategy is one of attrition, not conquest. Over the past 3 years, Russia has only managed to occupy 1.45% of Ukraine's land, a tiny sliver compared to the 20% already under their control, which includes Crimea and other regions seized before the official invasion. And get this, despite enormous military effort and loss, no large city has changed hands. Putin's military gambit costs him dearly. The Economist estimates Russia has lost between 1 million and 1.35 million soldiers, more than the combined losses of some nations in entire world wars. This toll is not just numbers, it's a humanity sinking into chaos and despair. Half of these casualties are fatalities. Evidence reveals that nearly 1% of Russia's fighting-age male population has died in Ukraine. The tragic toll is piling up at a rate that could reach over 2 million soldiers lost if Russia continues its current path to claim the remaining regions. To conquer all of Ukraine, an almost impossible task, Russia might need another 165 years of warfare, decades of relentless combat, bloodshed, and destruction. The numbers tell a grim story of a nation battling its own collapse. The brutal math doesn't favor Russia either. The current rate of progress suggests that by 2028, Russia might seize only the 4 regions, an incomplete and costly victory. If that happens, nearly 1 million more soldiers will fall, pushing casualties beyond 2 million, and still, they would control just about 22% of Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ukrainian defenses keep holding firm. Every day that passes, the illusion of Russian dominance shatters further. But here's the twist: despite all this carnage and stagnation, Putin's leverage in peacemaking erodes with each lost soldier. Rumors swirl that Russia's territorial gains once served as a diplomatic weapon used to demand concessions, to threaten escalation. The deeper the losses, the thinner their negotiating hand becomes. Could this internal bleeding force Putin into a corner with no way out? Or is it a calculated sacrifice, inching toward an even darker goal? And behind the scenes, a harrowing truth emerges: Russia's battlefield injury system is near collapse. The wounded are abandoned because of the lack of proper evacuation, only 1.3 wounded soldiers for every death. That means many injured soldiers face a grim fate: they're left to die alone, poorly trained in battlefield medicine. Their screams drowned out by the chaos and gunfire. The cost is mounting: almost half of all casualties are fatalities now. How much longer can Russia sustain this slaughter? The numbers paint a horrifying picture of a war of attrition with no clear winner. To capture the remaining territories, Russia would need to keep fighting for decades, just on current pace, until approximately the year 2193. An infinite war, with endless sacrifice, all for what? A handful of land, and a nation on the brink of self-destruction. The internal decay is palpable. Putin's grand plan isn't a display of strength. Instead, it's an unraveling of Russia itself, bleeding inside, losing countless soldiers, a nation teetering on the edge of collapse. All the while, Ukraine stands resilient, a symbol of unyielding resistance. What's left of Russia once the war ends? A shell of a superpower, engulfed in its own ruin. And the world watches, trembling, questioning whether this brutal grind will end with Russia's victory or its ultimate defeat. Following our last look at the grim math of conquest, we delved into projected Russian losses for partial victories. Casualties could soar above 2 million soldiers, yet gaining just 22 to 23% of Ukraine's land. That staggering toll raises the question: why fight on when the prize seems so minuscule? Now, let's twist the lens on the numbers. Imagine Russia's feet sinking deeper into the mud of ambition. Hold your breath. What if this war drags on for generations, devouring lives like a hungry beast devouring prey? Pretend we're flashing back to the early days of invasion. The air reeks of diesel fumes mixing with fear. Boots crunch on frozen earth, voices shouting orders in the frost, skin tingling from biting cold. That's the sensory sting of reality, a memory Putin ignores as he pushes on, twisting alliances into lies. Rhetorical question lingers: how does a leader gamble his nation's soul for scraps of soil? Russia clutches 20% of Ukraine today. In 3 punishing years, it snared a meager 1.4% per The Economist. That leaves 80% waiting, untamed. Divide 80% by that dismal 1.5% annual creep. You get over 55 chunks of 3-year agony. Multiply those blocks. Bloated by 12. Total? Around 165 years. Yes, a century and a half of ceaseless slaughter. Assuming Ukraine resists every step. That means Russia bleeds over 55.6 million soldiers. Dead, injured, vanished. Generations evaporate after Putin and his circle descend into dust. Can you feel the creeping horror, the scars on millions of families? Ukraine endures its own bitter toll. We'll explore that abyss soon. For now, these digits expose the vicious grind Putin ignited. His boasts mask microscopic gains. Far from crushing Ukraine, he's hollowing Russia. A fractured remnant might be all that's left. No enemy humiliation, just self-inflicted wounds unraveling a once mighty empire. The world watches, gasping at this unexpected pivot: domination turned to ruin. What looms for Russia in the shadow of tomorrow? The Economist's revelations should jolt peace negotiators. Especially the United States. Russia wields far less sway than demanded. Shockingly, territory seized fuels Putin's leverage, per the Jamestown Foundation. In its November 26 report, it cuts deep. Moscow's negotiations thrive on force, not forgiveness. They ramp up pressure when talks fracture. Pivot to feign strength before summits. We've witnessed this deceit time and again. Peace talks intensify now, laced with deception. Putin waves his meager gains like trophies. But the scent of defeat wafts strong. Smell the rotting ambition? Hear the faint echo of crumbling strategies? Yet, a twist awaits. As discussions heat up, will Putin's illusion crack? Could one revelation shatter his hollow empire? Or will the war sputter on, dragging us all into the abyss? You're left dangling, wondering if Russia's leverage is just a house of cards. What's next in this tale of twisted ambitions? Hold on tight. The real fallout might just humiliate the invader in ways unseen. Breathe deep. The grind continues. Russia's strategy has always been driven by deception, not genuine progress. As tensions flare, Moscow ramps up its threats, trying desperately to show strength before major diplomatic talks. They pivot suddenly, exaggerating victories to create illusions of dominance. But what if their claimed conquests are nothing but smoke and mirrors? They recently announced a supposed capture of Pokrovsk, just ahead of high-stakes meetings with U.S. envoys. The timing is too precise to be accidental. Putin's team wanted the world to believe Russia was advancing fast, claiming a vital city on Ukraine's front line had fallen. Yet, behind the scenes, the truth is much darker. Investigative reports from Australia's ABC reveal that Ukraine continues to fiercely defend Pokrovsk. Soldiers are fighting tooth and nail, refusing to surrender the city that Russia desperately wants to claim. The city's fall isn't inevitable yet. Ukraine appears determined to make Russia bleed as much as possible, before retreating to other fortress cities in Donetsk. But here's the question: why did Putin rush to declare victory? The answer lies in manipulation. When Russian authorities made their announcement, the city wasn't yet in their control. It was a calculated move, an attempt to create the illusion of unstoppable momentum. The goal? To sway international perceptions and pressure Kyiv into an unfavorable peace deal. Russia's leaders believe that holding land equals having leverage. They see the occupation of territory as their bargaining chip. On December 3, after negotiations with the U.S. hit a dead end, Kremlin advisor Yuri Ushakov claimed that territory should dictate the peace process. According to him, recent battlefield achievements influence how foreign partners view negotiations. But here's the catch: what's the true cost? Ushakov conveniently omits the human toll. Russia's military casualties are staggering: thousands of soldiers dead, injured, or captured. Despite the claims of progress, the reality is an ongoing bloodbath. What kind of leverage is that? Is territory truly worth such devastation? And yet, Putin's government pushes on, fabricating victories to mask the brutal truth. Behind closed doors, many understand the facade crumbles under the weight of reality. Each false claim, each staged triumph, only deepens the lie. The world is watching, waiting. How long can Russia keep this charade afloat before everything collapses? This game of illusions has a cost beyond numbers. It fuels a relentless war that devours its own people, its own country. Russia may be shouting victory, but internally, chaos brews. The real question remains: how much more bloodshed will it take before the illusion shatters completely? Picture the roar of artillery echoing through frostbitten fields, where the stench of gunpowder clings to the air like a shroud, and soldiers' clawed mud-stained boots, their breaths visible in the icy grip of winter. Is Russia's so-called victory in Ukraine nothing but a mirage, a smokescreen designed by Putin to humiliate his foes on the global stage, masking catastrophic losses that could shatter his empire? This shocking claim, buried in expert analyses, exposes how a tiny sliver of land has bled Russia dry, forcing us to question: can Putin really wage a war that devours his own nation for crumbs? Russia's relentless advance through Ukrainian territory feels like an unstoppable tide, with Vladimir Putin's forces claiming more ground each day, inching ever closer to crumbling the defenses of the Donbas region. Once that barrier falls, the path opens to engulf the rest of Ukraine, marching straight toward Kyiv itself, unless Ukraine bends to Putin's extreme demands immediately. That's the narrative Putin broadcasts to the world, painting his campaign as a triumphant saga. But peel back the layers, and the truth emerges stark and brutal. This single-minded obsession with conquering Ukraine has hollowed out Russia from the inside, sacrificing soldiers and resources for a pitiful return: a mere 1.45% of Ukrainian land. According to a detailed Economist report from December 2, Russia's gains in 2025 prove slightly swifter than past years, totaling 4,562 square kilometers, or roughly 1,760 square miles, by December's end. That's a marginal improvement over the 3,704 square kilometers, or about 1,440 square miles, seized in 2024. November, however, surged at a record pace since the invasion's onset, with around 690 square kilometers, or 266 square miles, overtaken in just 30 days. At first glance, this velocity spells doom for Ukraine. Yet, beneath the surface lie cracks that reveal a far grimmer reality one Putin desperately shields from the world. These figures, while touted as victories, shrink in scale when inspected closely. Snatching 266 square miles in November equates to capturing just 1.5 Los Angeles International Airports, or LAX units, daily. Much of it? Barren earth, seized during futile assaults on Ukraine's fortified cities. The real failure lies in Russia's inability to shatter even a single major stronghold. Speed means nothing against this stagnation, as evidenced by ongoing sieges of smaller towns like Pokrovsk, pounded for over a year without decisive collapse. The Economist's cold facts lay it bare. Over 3 years, Russia has claimed only an additional 1.45% of Ukraine's land, housing nearly the same portion of its pre-war populace. No significant urban centers have shifted hands. Pokrovsk, a modest city of 61,000, Ukraine's 73rd largest before the conflict, remains unresolved after 14 months of siege. Repeat that figure, 1.45%. In over 3 brutal years, it's pathetically minimal. Russia now controls about 20% of Ukraine, factoring in the 2014 Crimean grab and early eastern successes since rolled back by Ukrainian counteroffensives. Post-invasion stalemate has reduced advances to a crawl, exacting a horrifying toll. The cost? Unspeakable. A meta-estimate cited by The Economist suggests 1 million to 1.35 million Russian soldiers lost to death, injury, or capture since hostilities erupted. United 24 Media equates this carnage to U.S. World War II casualties over comparable timelines. The National World War II Museum corroborates, noting 416,800 American soldier deaths, though wounding figures vary globally. In essence, the U.S. endured such losses liberating Western Europe, aiding Germany's defeat, and claiming territories elsewhere, while Russia matches that horror for a mere 1.45% of Ukraine. Astonishingly, the first half of 2025 alone claimed 100,000 Russian lives, per U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, equal to quarter of America's World War II deaths in 6 months only. Russia's attritional tactics echo Soviet history, with historians citing 16 million casualties during that era, or 8.8 to 10.7 million soldiers plus up to 15.2 million civilians by other counts. Yet, hemorrhaging up to 1.35 million for 1.45% reveals absurdity, eroding 1% of Russia's fighting-age men. Further attrition looms. Politico's October report cites a dropping Russian dead-to-wounded ratio, now 1.3 injured per fatality, stemming from inadequate battlefield evacuation and medical training, per Ukrainian military intelligence outlet I Want to Live. Nearly half of casualties are now permanent deaths, crippling Russia's frontline recycling and future push. Mathematically, it crumbles under scrutiny. Euromaidan Press and The Economist calculate it'd take until May 2028 to fully seize the partially held regions, Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia, spanning another 20,345 square kilometers. Spanning 2.5 years from this video's creation, producing 800,000 to 900,000 more losses, propelling totals beyond 2 million, for just 22 to 23% of Ukraine. Dividing the remaining 80% by that 1.5% annual increment yields over 55 3-year stretches, totaling 165 years of combat under static conditions. If Ukraine withstands, Russia could lose 55.6 million soldiers over generations, outlasting Putin's regime. Ukraine suffers attrition too, but these metrics underscore Russia's self-inflicted annihilation. Rather than dominating, Putin starves his nation. Immediate ramifications? The Economist's data urges peace mediators, especially the U.S., to dismiss Russia's overstated leverage. The Jamestown Foundation noted territory as Putin's bargaining chip since talks' onset. In a November 26 analysis, it stated, Moscow's approach roots in leverage, not goodwill. It escalates threats during stumbles and shifts stances to feign potency ahead of key diplomatic summits. Continuing from Russia's murky gains, where advancements seem rapid but negligible, turning Pokrovsk into propaganda leverage, let's uncover the deception. Did Putin fabricate Pokrovsk's fall,
twisting it to pressure the US into forcing Ukraine's hand, even as real losses mount?
This audacious ploy, whispered in diplomatic halls, could alter peace talks irreversibly, humiliating global powers duped by illusions. Yuri Ushakov's words praise Russian soldiers' exploits, refining foreign partners' views on peace paths. Yet, he omits the catastrophic toll levied for meager strides, as grand as Putin boasts. Ignoring casualty scales and territorial absences, he paints progress rosily. Diplomatically muffled, he sidesteps global scrutiny, leaving unaddressed the fabricated victory in Pokrovsk, Putin's orchestrated myth to sway the US, compelling Ukraine into an unbalanced truce.
How does this fabrication sting, exposing Putin's desperation in a war that bleeds him more than his enemy?
A telling absurdity emerges.
Amidst this, the US hedges bets.
On December 8, Kyiv Independent covered U.S. NATO Ambassador Matt Whitaker's remarks, signaling Trump's leverage hunt.
Significant peace strides noted, yet abandonment risks lurk if deals falter.
Crucially, Whitaker claims Trump knows how to exert pressure on both sides. Amid mixed signals, walkaway threats versus leverage talk, it probes Trump's credence in Russia's claimed inroads.
Pressuring Ukraine hints at partial belief in Putin's boasts, while Russia's exclusion from Moscow talks shows dissent.
Assuming pro-Ukraine stance, unconfirmed now quite plausible, economist data with Institute for the Study of War bolsters paint Russia's plight direly.
What if peace hinges on piercing this veil, revealing Putin's empire on the brink?
An unexpected shift looms. Beyond projections of decades for full conquest and 2.5 years for eastern realms, losses scale for that 1.5% triumph screams futility. Soldiers' sacrifices, claimed as triumphs, actually erode Russia's core.
Can this attrition ignite internal collapse before Kyiv falls, twisting Putin's grand design into his undoing?
The air thickens with foreboding, where each gunshot resonates as a toll for futility, and the grim scent of defeat pervades the narrative.
Imagine the unthinkable. What if Russia's victories in Ukraine are just a smokescreen for a catastrophic failure that's devouring their own nation?
The stench of defeat hangs heavy in the air, as soldiers march into blood-soaked fields, only to claw at a mere 1.45% of Ukraine's land in 3 grueling years.
Could this be the moment Putin realizes his empire is crumbling under the weight of its own aggression? Stay tuned as we uncover the brutal truths hidden beneath the headlines.
That's the shocking underbelly we've just exposed. Russia's so-called advances in Ukraine, masked as triumphs, but in reality, a slow hemorrhage draining their strength dry.
Now, dive deeper into how Putin's claims of dominance mask a grim reality that's far from strong.
Picture the Kremlin's war room, dimly lit and thick with the acrid smoke of burning maps, where generals whisper of unimpressive gains that hardly dent Ukraine's resolve. Despite November's minor speed-up, 690 square kilometers, or about 266 square miles seized, it's nothing but a fleeting illusion. These pockets of earth, often barren and scarred by artillery's thunderous booms, echo with the futile roars of tanks grinding against unyielding defenses. Yet, Putin spins it as leverage, ignoring the city's labyrinthine fortifications, trenches snaking like poisonous veins through the soil, and miles of barbed wire that shreds the flesh of attackers. What happens when this facade crumbles, revealing the true cost of a war that's already claimed 1 to 1.35 million lives? Building on that facade crumbling, where November's meager 266 square miles screams fragility rather than power, let's confront the stark truth. Russia's push toward Pokrovsk isn't a conquest, it's a trap. Touch the damp earth here, where mud clings to boots like a sinister embrace, and you'll sense the tactical retreats bleeding the invaders.
Ukraine pulls back deliberately, luring foes into kill zones reeking of explosives and despair. Even if Pokrovsk falls, leaving a ghost town of rubble, the Donetsk region waits, fortified with bunkers humming with the low drone of machinery, ready for the grinder of endless battle. No major city has tumbled, and Pokrovsk's 14-month agony foreshadows more horrors. Imagine the tactile terror of reaching a fortified wall, jagged and cold under your palms, as explosives detonate with earth-shaking force. How long can Russia endure this attrition before their military shatters like fragile glass? The answer lies in the body count, tens of thousands per month, and Ukraine's growing edge. From that blood-soaked grind in Donetsk, where fortified walls and acrid fumes spell doom for invaders, shift your gaze to the broader war's arithmetic, equally damning. Russia's 20% hold now, after 4 years,
barely scratches Ukraine's vastness.
The math? Simply appalling.
To claim the four eastern regions, Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, Zaporizhia, spanning 20,345 square kilometers, they'd need until May 2028, sacrificing another 800,000 to 900,000 souls. Total casualties could soar past 2 million.
Feel the chill of night watches on frostbitten outposts,
where the wind carries distant gunfires crackle.
If current rates persist, overtaking 80% of Ukraine?
Multiply today's losses, 55 blocks of 3 years each, a 165-year nightmare, slaughtering 55.6 million more.
Ukraine suffers too, but Russia's self-inflicted wounds question everything. Can Putin's hubris survive this generational bloodbath, or will it rot his legacy?
Echoing the generational nightmare Russia's math predicts, exposing zeroing in on peace's futility. Picture weary diplomats in sterile rooms, the air tense with unspoken threats, where Putin's leverage crumbles under scrutiny. No large cities swapped hands, no strategy beyond attrition, which festers like an untreatable wound.
Moscow's escalations, empty bluffs before summits, confirm it's about power, not goodwill.
The Economist's expose reveals pathetic progress, 1.45% in 3 years for 1 million plus lost. Smell the coppery tang of spilled blood in reports, hear the muffled cries over ruined landscapes. Dead to wounded ratios plummeting mean orphaned families, untrained medics abandoning the injured. How can negotiations proceed when Russia's army, depleted by 1% of fighting-age men, stares into oblivion? This question haunts global talks, as Ukraine's steadfast defense forces weigh the scales. This haunting question in peace talks, the dwindling army's echo, pulls us to a pivotal twist: Ukraine's cunning survival. Beyond retreats luring Russians into snares, they've transformed the east into a death maze. Trenches gouge the earth like fresh scars, tank traps loom ominously, barbed wire rasps against skin in the breeze.
Secret minefields vibrate with unseen danger beneath footfalls, bunkers fortify for relentless counterstrikes. As Pokrovsk's rubble smokes, peaceful yet barbaric traps await. Rhetoric rings: how much blood can Russia spill before the boodle of peace shatters irrevocably? The sensory nightmare, damp soil squelch, thunderous blasts, fear's metallic taste signals a turning point where Putin's leverage evaporates.
In the gritty underbelly of this endless war, Russia's so-called mighty advances crumble under the weight of a staggering cost, millions of lives shattered for just a sliver of land.
Can Putin's ruthless gamble really devour his own nation from within, leaving only a hollow shell?
Imagine the blood-soaked fields of Ukraine, where every inch seized by Russian boots echoes with the cries of the fallen, a reminder that no victory is worth such devastation. Picture this: a chilling snapshot from the early days of Putin's folly, when he grandly promised swift conquest. The air was thick with the scent of gunpowder and diesel fumes, soldiers' boots crunching through frost-laced mud, the distant thrum of artillery rattling the bones like an unrelenting storm.
Back then, it felt like an unstoppable march, but now? It's a nightmare of attrition, dragging Russia into oblivion for a mere 1.45% of Ukraine.
How pathetic is that paltry return, bloodshed on this scale for gains that mock the effort? As Russia's forces bleed more troops month by month, their push is slow to a crawl, exposing weaknesses that Ukraine exploits ruthlessly. With each heavy loss, Putin's grip weakens, his army crippled by a strategy of exhaustion. The scent of failure lingers, a metallic tang in the air from spilled blood and broken dreams.
Can Russia endure, or is its leader dooming the nation itself to ruin? Yet, Ukraine's defenses aren't unscathed. They've suffered deeply, their ranks thinning in this savage grinder. Reports whisper of heavy casualties, a manpower crunch tightening like a noose.
The November 28 Al Jazeera piece by Sergei Kuzananov paints a dire picture: Ukraine scrambling for soldiers amidst waves of desertions, around 21,000 leaving in October alone.
Is Ukraine verging on collapse, its strength sapped faster than they admit? Beneath the surface, a provocative twist emerges: Ukraine's counterattacks on Russia's oil heartland, strikes fueled by shadowy U.S. intelligence, aiming to choke Putin's war machine and spark internal chaos. Feel the rumble of explosions vibrating through the earth, the acrid smoke of burning refineries stinging the lungs, a tactile jolt of defiance. But this leverage cuts both ways. Could America pulling back intelligence cripple Ukraine more than halting weapons? Bloomberg's November report warns of just that. And remember Trump's fleeting intel blackout in March?
In peace talks looming like a storm cloud, Russia's territorial crumbs stand exposed as paper-thin leverage. As casualties mount to 2 million or more, projections show Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia still out of reach until May 2028, a staggering 800,000 more Russians lost for that meager prize.
The grind reeks of futility, soil saturated with sorrow, each square kilometer tasting like betrayal. With Ukraine's defenses holding firm, Russia's fate hangs in the balance, a generation of loss for what? Will America's shadow play tip the scales, ending this horror before it consumes all?
In the last moments of our tale, we uncovered America's pivotal role, how cutting intelligence could cripple Ukraine strikes, and why the US holds the key to future battles and fragile peace talks, tying directly to Ukraine's unyielding stand against overwhelming odds.
Imagine this: what if the mighty bear of Russia, roaring across frozen fields, is actually devouring its own heart? Could one man's blind hunger for land shatter an empire from within?
Picture the icy winds howling through Moscow's streets, carrying whispers of doubt, the metallic tang of fear in the air as families clutch faded photos of lost sons.
This is no mere skirmish, it's a grinding storm where every step forward bleeds the aggressor dry.
If Ukraine clings to America's vital backing, if leaders like Trump wield their influence to squeeze the invader, then those pitiful scraps of ground seized amid oceans of loss might just topple the throne. Think of it, Putin's so-called triumphs over 3 grueling years, tiny patches for rivers of sacrifice, could ignite the fire that consumes him. Not from Ukraine's gallant push, but from the fury brewing in Russia's own shadows.
The task for the defenders?
Hold the line, endure the thunder of distant booms, feel the earth tremble under relentless pressure, until that inner rage erupts. Recall those daring blows against Russia's fuel lifelines, explosions echoing like thunderclaps in the night, flames licking the horizon with acrid smoke that chokes the sky.
These aren't random acts, they're calculated sparks to fan outrage at home. On December 3rd, reports from the Daily Express painted a chilling picture. Deep inside Russia, polls reveal a cracking facade. 56% crave an instant halt to the chaos, support for dragging on plummets to a mere 23%. And 83%?
They confess exhaustion, a bone-deep weariness from their rulers' endless gamble.
Can you hear it?
The murmur of crowds in snow-dusted squares, breaths fogging the air as hope flickers like a dying lantern. If these voices ring true, they scream that ordinary souls yearn for silence now, with peace dangling like a fragile truce on the horizon.
Should Putin press on amid this tide?
The swell of discontent could surge, forcing his hand just to soothe the storming masses.
Every defender's resolve, every delay in the mud-soaked advance, tips the scales toward that breaking point. Why?
Because the people sense it, their leader herds them like shadows into his personal inferno, sacrificing futures for fleeting illusions of glory. The fractures deepen, my friends, invisible yet shattering. A high-ranking officer, once loyal to the core, has turned the blade inward. He exposes the invasion's catastrophic false start, day one disasters born of arrogant blunders, flawed whispers from spies that led to rivers of unforeseen ruin. Kremlin dreams crumbled under the weight of reality, intelligence that betrayed more than it revealed, and a conflict that devours far beyond any mad vision. The air grows thick with betrayal's bitter scent, echoes of whispered confessions in dimly lit rooms, as the empire teeters on the edge of its own abyss. But here's the twist that chills the soul. What if Putin's unyielding grip doesn't just stall Ukraine's fall, but awakens a revolution from the ashes of his ambition? As losses mount like winter's endless night, and voices rise in defiant harmony, the bear may not conquer the east. It could collapse under its own roar, leaving a hollowed nation to reckon with the ghosts of what was lost. In this epic clash, victory isn't in maps redrawn, it's in the hearts that finally refuse to bleed. The storm breaks, and dawn pierces the gloom.